Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In lecture 52, we will talk about economic and social development. So, the different concepts that we will cover are economic and social development in general. Then we will talk about SDG 8, 9 and 10, which we have learned and earlier. And also we will talk about how we can implement these targets at the ULB level. Finally, we will talk about different government schemes and programs for economic and social development. And we will end with the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana. Now, economic and social development, these are the three goals which we have listed. But in addition to this, there could be other goals as well. For example, this is directly connected with poverty reduction, goal number 1, and also reduction of hunger. So overall, if I want to, this economic development and poverty all go hand in hand. So when we talk about urban, particularly in urban areas, when we talk about urban poverty and vulnerability, it's a multidimensional, construct, and it involves it covers both the occupational aspects, which could be linked with economic, then the residential aspects, that it could be linked with the housing conditions. It could be also linked with different social aspects as well. For example, when we talk about occupational, many people in urban areas are engaged in precarious livelihoods, risky ones, engaged in informal sector. So not everybody works in the formal sector, and because they're in the informal sector, they are neither covered by different kinds of protection schemes such as insurances or pension schemes and so on. Then lack of job security, poor working conditions. So all these are different issues which are there in urban areas, and we have to improve upon that. So these are occupational issues. Then residential issues such as access to land, shelter and basic services in an urban area. And social issues are due to specific gender, like certain genders, because of their vulnerability, they are more susceptible to certain kind of crimes or even poverty as well. Age, social stratification, lack of social protection, inadequate representation in the governance, like we have to increase the percentage of women in governance and so on. So all these issues are connected: social, residential, occupational, and overall this together they can result in economic and social development. So residential, particularly the residential vulnerability part, could be some aspect of it has been considered in the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana for the urban areas, where government provides subsidized housing to the poor. Whereas for occupational and social vulnerabilities, this is the focus of this particular lecture, and this could be addressed via market-based skill development and through facilitating self-employment. So these are two terms. One is, if I allow people to develop, or if I facilitate people to develop different skill sets, they can get engaged in, they will be gainfully employed, and the skills has to be market-based, that is as per the demand of the market. And we can also make sure that, or we can also facilitate people to start their own ventures or enterprises. So that means through self-employment ventures. And finally, we have to make sure to enable all this. There has to be easy access to credit for doing training, credit for opening up certain companies. So all this has to be also facilitated. So this is the part which we will deal with in this particular lecture. And other aspects of poverty we will talk in the next lecture. So as you can see that all these different vulnerabilities are interrelated. So we cannot just talk about one and ignore the others. Whereas certain sections of society, again, women, children, the aged, SC, STs, minorities and different label persons, they are more vulnerable. So that means whenever we are implementing any kind of skills, any kind of programs for skill development or self-employment, or for that matters for any kind of social development or some sort of social welfare schemes, we should make sure that this vulnerable groups are well taken care of. Otherwise, they may not get those particular benefits. So this is the focus whenever we design any kind of this kind of program or schemes for urban areas. We have to be careful that these vulnerable groups should not be missed out. So this we will also discuss a little in detail in the last lecture of this particular module. So coming to SDG 8, we will go for each goal one at a time. We will first talk about these three goals. SDG 8 is to promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment and decent work for all. So that means there has to be economic growth definitely, but at the same point of time, this could be only achieved by generating employment and to provide decent work for all. It has to be not just work, it has to be work which is decent enough where people will be happy to work. So SDG 8 has got several targets. As you can see, there is a list of targets. So more or less, we talk about different ways to diversify cities or ULBs or in societies should have a diversified approach towards economic productivity. Societies should innovate. Societies should upgrade. They shouldn't get stuck. So these are some basic general targets which is applicable to every country or every society. Now, in addition to that, there has to be promotion of policies to support job creation and growing enterprises, improving resource efficiency in consumption and production, full employment and decent work with equal pay for both genders, promote youth employment, education and training. So not only employment, it has to come via, of course, we have to provide education as well as training so that they are gainfully employed. Ending slavery, trafficking and child labor, modern slavery of course, protecting labor rights and promote safe working environments, promote beneficial and sustainable tourism, and universal access to banking, insurance and financial services. So you can see this is very, very important. So the other things are like trade support and developing global youth employment strategies. So these are not actually related with the ULB, but in general we can say all these are lofty ideals or lofty targets which every society should try to achieve. Now, how do I really bring these targets or these ideals to the ULB's level to make sure that actually we do something so that we see changes in the ground? So, to do that, we have to create certain kinds of databases, we have to create certain kinds of maps, and then we have to track what is happening in the ULBs for these particular aspects. So some of this, what we can do listed in the United Nations 2018 report. So we have also listed that over here. So for example, we can, to ensure that we are keeping track of all the development in the city, particularly in regards to jobs and all, we can create maps for micro, small and medium enterprises, not the big ones of course, these are only talking about the smaller ones. Then we should also have data and maps on the informal enterprises, where are the informal markets, where are the vendors, where are the different other kinds of employees which are, and we have to have statistics on the employees who are employed in the informal sector. Then enterprise opportunities in the ULB for general and differently abled. For both general people and for differently abled people, what are the opportunities that are present? So we have to keep track of that. If those are not there, we have to provide them. Then access of formal and informal business enterprise to public goods and services. Government provides several schemes for the benefit of businesses and all. So we have to make sure that those informations reach the formal and informal businesses so they can take those particular benefits and they can grow their business. And then we have to also, on the other side, we have to also keep track of the candidates who are looking for jobs, maybe through employment exchanges and all, and also candidates who are, there is a potential to create certain kinds of new businesses, right? People who can open their own businesses. So then tracking of what the market requires, in which direction the market is moving, what sort of skill sets are required, and then making sure the job seeking candidates have got similar skill set or to provide those skill sets to those people, to those job seeking candidates, so that they can get those particular jobs. Then database on labor and employment overall. So these are the things that has to be kept track at the ULB level. And at the same point of time, ULB should also make sure that forced labor, modern slavery, human trafficking, these are not there in the ULB. So for that, there has to be strict monitoring or maybe strict legislation as well. And also, we have to track people who are at risk. Why? What kind of people? Dropouts. Students who will drop out of schools. Because if you drop out of schools, eventually you will not get the education, neither the skill set to get a decent job. Or migrants. People move from one city to another, but sometimes they get into they are put into forced labor, or there may be human trafficking as well. So we have to keep track of this particular people. Manual scavengers, earlier, as you know, that we have stopped by rule, manual scavengers has to be employed in certain other sectors. We have discussed that in detail in previous lectures. So keeping track of that. Women and child-headed households, domestic workers, forced labor, all this has to be kept track, or we have to make sure that these are tracked, and then we can take some measures to prevent them. Now, what sort of actions and awareness that has to be generated? What sort of actions has to be taken in the ULB level, or what sort of awareness programs can be generated? So, first of all, action-wise, these actions are taken via several government programs or certain kind of missions which are taken up by the government from time to time. For example, the National Skill Development Program, which is a national mission so that we can provide training and job opportunities to people. So how this kind of programs has to be implemented at the ULB level. Entrepreneurship training has to be provided, can be given at the ULB level. Then there has to be specific programs for startups and new enterprises. ULBs can create some innovation hubs, or they can create some sort of tax breaks, or some sort of infrastructure where startups can utilize those kind of infrastructure. Then job creation via ongoing schemes and via sponsorships from other agencies, other private, maybe from enterprises and all. Apprenticeship programs, maybe it could be done under the PPP model. So this will train people in their jobs, and then eventually they will get their job. Prevention of child labor, and for that urban level child protection committees can be formed, and we can also create awareness on prevention of child labor. Rehabilitation of manual scavengers. These programs we have discussed earlier, like in many municipal bodies now engage them for maybe in the solid waste management, in other sectors. Eradication of forced labor, modern slavery, human trafficking, as we discussed earlier as well. So these are some of the actions the ULB can take, and along with that they can create awareness on wage equality. That means that men and women should be paid equally for the same job. Then it can create information, education and communication material on labor legislation, rights and entitlements, so that people know that what they are entitled to, what the enterprise has to pay them. Enabling linkage between formal and informal sectors, so that informal sector, to gradually bring informal sector into the formal domain, so that they can be taxed, and they can get the facilities also provided by the government and so on. So these are the different actions which could be taken at the ULB level. Now, this was related with primarily SDG 8 was talking about how we can improve the overall workforce and how we can provide jobs and so on, whereas SDG 9 talks mostly about the industry, innovation and infrastructure. That means this is where we have to build resilient infrastructure and promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and we have to also foster innovation. So this is more about the industry part. That means that was more about the people. This is more about the facilities that the ULB can create, so that we can create new industries, we can foster innovation and so on. So looking at the targets or means to the direct outcome targets and the means to achieve targets, you can see that the outcome targets are to develop sustainable, resilient and inclusive infrastructure. Again, these are very general targets. Then sustainable industrialization, increase access to financial services and markets. So government has to create schemes. ULB cannot create, they can create some schemes, maybe the state government and also can create some schemes for getting some sort of financial incentives or some sort of financial services which can help them to grow their business or can even set up their business. And upgrade all industries and infrastructure for sustainability. So gradually to convert the industries via regulation or via some handholding so that they move to more sustainable processes or greener processes and so on. Enhance research and upgrade industrial technologies. And to some of the other targets are to facilitate sustainable infrastructure development for developing countries, support domestic technology development and industrial diversification, and universal access to information and communication technology. So these are general targets for the overall world, but again, when we have to bring it to the ULB level, we can create specific programs for that particular city or that particular state so that we can improve these aspects in our urban bodies as well. So what can the ULB do in regards to SD in this particular sustainable development goals? We can create data, again, we can have data and maps on existing and potential industries and industrial clusters where we can set up new industry, what sort of new industries could be brought in an urban area. We can create data, we can generate data and create maps for that. This will help us to identify where we should send our, which industries we should target, which industrial groups can be approached to set up certain industries in a certain urban areas and so on. Then what sort of supporting infrastructure is required so that this sort of industries could be set up. If there are hazardous industries, then how we can mitigate the risk. So some programs on that. Then how to identify startups in the urban area and then promote them. So these are different aspects which we can cover. And certain direct actions and awareness. First of all, we are having several programs like Smart City program, Smart City Mission, or the Amrut program, and where we can bring in the different, this agenda of innovation, infrastructure, as well as climate change within this particular program. Then we can do some leveraging of, collaborations with the private sectors. Then we can access to financial services, access to infrastructure for industrial development both at the local and regional level, setting up of urban innovation hubs for startups and all, and then promotion and awareness of sustainable manufacturing processes, then ISC material on green technologies and intellectual property rights and other protection services. All these are different aspects that could be also considered. Again, these are very, very general goals. When we actually want to achieve this kind of targets, this is gradual. At the same point of time, each of this has to be looked into by the ULB, and then the ULB has to create some scheme, or maybe there are central schemes which the ULB need to adopt and implement that so that people are facilitated to create new industries, or industries are facilitated to expand their existing industries and so on. Finally, SDG 10 talks about reduced inequality. This is mostly among countries, but of course, when we talk about inequality at the ULB level, I think some of the aspects which are related with countries, that also could be brought in for the city as well. And so, for example, reduction of income inequalities in the urban area, promoting universal social, economic and political inclusion so that everybody can participate in these decisions, ensure equal opportunities and end discrimination, fiscal and social policies that promotes equality, regulation of global financial markets, enhanced representation for developing countries in financial institutions. These are again not ULB specific goals, and responsible and well managed migration policies. So others are mostly in regards to developing and developed countries. For example, reducing transaction cost for migrant remittances. So particularly this is important when people from developing countries go to developed countries and then they remit money so that they are not taxed over there. Then encourage development assistance and investment in least developed countries, and special and differential treatment for developing countries. So again, these are global goals, global targets. Now we have to bring them to the level of ULBs, and there, in case of ULBs, we can specifically focus on vulnerable population groups. We can generate data maps and we can track this particular groups in urban areas. We can collect data on incidents of discrimination against women, SC/STs, minorities and persons with disabilities, and we can also map their locations to take specific measures to reduce this kind of discrimination. Then occupant issues in slums and non-slum areas. We can go and ask people and survey people and ask them what sort of problems they are facing, what sort of services they are getting from the municipality. So as we have discussed earlier, we can do user perception surveys both in slum and non-slum areas. Determination of specific factors for slum formation in ULBs, and disaggregate data on population for trend analysis. That means we have to collect data on different population groups and we have to check the data over a longer period of time to see if we are improving on certain targets, or we can do trend analysis to predict that what kind of we would be able to achieve what sort of targets and so on. So some actions and awareness programs, we can representation of marginalized groups in decision making. So in different committees and all that are formed, we have to bring in representation from marginalized groups. As you can see in earlier when we have discussed setting up of different committees, you have seen that there are representatives like when in the ward committees and all, in the ULBs, the decision making bodies, they have representative from the marginalized groups. Then universal access to affordable housing, social services and public utilities. Everybody should get access to that. Information of government schemes and programs for vulnerable population groups. So there has to be IIT campaigns in regards to that. Equal opportunity and reduction of inequalities of outcome. Elimination of discriminatory policies and practices, and social, economic and political inclusion for all. And finally, this prevention of discrimination and violence. So more or less, as you can see that it's the same thing that we are, some are actions, some are awareness campaigns in the same regards, but overall our target should be to reduce inequality and reduce discrimination in urban areas. So finally, we come to the different government schemes and programs for economic and social development. And as you understand that there are several central and state government schemes which are running in the country, which are implemented in the urban areas. Certain schemes are for industry development, certain schemes are for youth welfare schemes, for like skill generations or employment for the youth and so on. Then schemes and programs for affordable housing, social services, public utilities, health. All these schemes and programs actually are geared or they are brought in so that it leads to economic and social development of the entire country and also for the ULB as well. So some of the specific programs which influences economic and social development are the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana or the National Urban Livelihood Mission. We will discuss this in detail. Then PM Mudra program. This is where government gives loans. Atal Pension Yojana, as you understand from the term, there is it's a system for pension. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, where residential where housing is provided or subsidized for poor income groups. Urban Public Distribution System. So this is the PDS system or the ration system where we provide subsidized food grains or other food materials to the poor. Pradhan Mantri Jivan Jyoti Bima Yojana. So again, this is a insurance program. Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, health insurance program. Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. This is where government is providing gas connections for households so that women don't have to go and gather firewood, or they don't have to suffer the smoke that comes out of cooking using firewood and all. And prohibition of employment as manual scavengers and the Rehabilitation Act. We have discussed this earlier. And also there are several state and other central schemes as well. Now coming to the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana. This was set up by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and this has got two components. One is the National Rural Livelihood Mission, NRLM, and the other is the National Urban Livelihood Mission, which is NULM. This is also known as the Rashtriya Shahari Ajivika Mission. Now, there are multiple aims which covers, which is there for this particular Yojana or this particular program. So, primary aim is to uplift the urban poor, but you have got several sub-objectives or sub-aims, you can say. So, the first two is related to improvement of the livelihood opportunities for the people, and as a result, it will reduce poverty and vulnerability. And this can be only done via skill development. So, one main objective is to develop skill set of the people. The other is to provide shelters for the urban homeless. So, this is not, the schemes where we provide housing, but this is like for homeless people, they should have a shelter so that they don't suffer the environment, or they don't suffer the rain or the cold and so on. And the other is providing access to suitable spaces, institutional credit, social security, and skills to the urban street vendors. So, a huge amount of poor people are engaged in the informal economy. They earn their livelihood from the informal by running several businesses which are informal. So, and mostly these are street vendors, or they don't have a proper shop and all. So that means government has to look into this particular vulnerable group as well. So these are the primary goals for this, or primary aims which are covered in this particular scheme. So as per the 74th Amendment Act, as we have discussed earlier, this ULBs are responsible for implementing the programs for economic and social development of the urban poor, including skills and livelihood generation. So obviously, this program has to be run at the ULB level eventually. So the target cities for this particular program are district and town headquarters, and all cities with population greater than 1 lakh. Whereas state government and urban territories can decide on other statutory towns based on local capacity and requirement. So as per the state can also decide on towns with lesser population. The target population is primarily the urban poor and the homeless, but sometimes it's difficult to determine who is urban poor or so. So in that case, households below poverty line are considered, plus certain disadvantaged groups such as SC, STs, women, minorities, disabled, etc. to a maximum extent of 25% is also considered while determining the target population for this particular scheme. So usually what this scheme covers are formation of self-help groups and federations. One member from every poor household, and preferably a woman member, should be part of these self-help groups, and this groups acts as a support system to meet financial and social needs in that particular community. Then universal financial inclusion. What it means is every person should have a bank account, and as soon as a person have bank account, he should be able to get credit, loans, affordable insurance, and also remittance facilities, so that whenever government provides certain subsidy and all, it can reach directly into his account. And at the same point of time, he should be given adequate financial literacy so that he can use this kind of services. Then community facilitators such as bank mitras and bima mitras, these are people who will help people to or they can facilitate use of this kind of services provided by the government for the normal people who are not aware of this kind of services, and facilitate coverage of urban poor via different kind of insurances such as the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana and Janashri Bima Yojana. So one is life insurance, one is health insurance, which are provided for the poor people. Now, in addition to all these different schemes, we also have city livelihood centers, and as you can understand, these are centers where these are resource centers for employment and skill training, and here people get information about what kind of jobs are available, what is the demand in the market, and what kind of skill training programs are being conducted, what are the placement opportunities, and so on. So of course, some certain programs are also can be conducted in these centers. So in addition, there people can get guidance, counseling, and technical support for self-employment ventures. So if you want to open a certain company, or you want to open just a shop, or maybe a street vendor, you can also get information on how to go ahead with the process, and also how to avail credit for all this. So these are the different things which are covered in the city livelihood center, and the norm is like between for smaller cities like between 1 to 3 lakh there is at least 1 CLC, whereas for large cities above 10 lakhs there are even 8 CLCs, and in between you can see that for 5 to 10 lakhs there are 3, and 3 to 5 lakhs there are 2 CLCs which are proposed. And in addition, even though the city is less than 3 lakhs, but it's a district and town headquarters, and any kind of statutory town with population below 1 lakh, that could be 1 CLC as well. Now, this Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana for National Urban Livelihood Mission, there are 2 aspects to it. This scheme helps in enterprise development. Now, how it does it? It can provide around 15,000 cash investment for some skill training and eventual placement into some enterprise, or for even opening an enterprise. Then for the self-employment program, it can give loans to individual enterprises to the extent of 2 lakhs, and for group enterprises to the extent of 10 lakhs, and this helps in setting up both individual and micro enterprises, smaller companies. And the loan is at the rate of 7% interest, and there are no collaterals required. So usually poor people do not get loans because they cannot put anything in collateral. So this is a scheme which allows them to take a loan where they are supposed to return the money at a lower interest rate, but there would be no requirement of collaterals. Now, to manage all these programs and all, the city mission management units are set up, and dedicated CMUs for cities with greater than 50,000 population, and this looks into the ground level implementation of all these programs. And it's the state mission management unit also monitors the work of the SMMUs as well, and so it's an overall top-down approach for seeing that the skill generation and all these enterprise creation programs are going on at the urban level. And the second part of the DAY NULM program is for support of urban street vendors. So we have discussed that one is skill generation, one is the urban street vendors, and of course provision of housing for the homeless as well. So the function of ULBs is to identify the vendors, verification of vendors who are left out of any kind of schemes, capacity building and financing the enterprises this vendors wants to open, and it's a linkage between the vendors and the government. So this is what's the role of the ULB. For that, town vending committees are set up for identification of beneficiaries, for getting of loans and all the other which are there for are availing certain schemes in this particular regard. So usually this includes a 50% traders association and other authorities, 40% street vendors, and 10% of representatives from the NGOs. And this is headed by the municipal commissioner or the executive officer, and of course supported by the town vending committee. And usually this sponsoring of loan applications and monitoring implementation of the schemes, this is the role of this particular committee. So they are the ones, they verify the vendor and all, and then they sponsor the loan so that they make sure that they give guarantee for the loan application for this particular vendor, and they make sure they get the loan. And so overall implementation is being monitored via this particular committee. So the PM Swanidhi scheme is funded by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So through this particular scheme, this vendors can get a working capital loan of up to 10,000 rupees INR, and this scheme also makes sure that these people also pay back the loan through regular payments, and also they will reward digital transaction. So this is a special scheme which facilitates provision of loans for the vendors or informal street vendors. In addition to this kind of loans that we have discussed, there is also the PM Mudra Yojana or Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, so which is where loans are provided to non-corporates and non-farm small micro enterprises, and this is provided from banks, non-banking financial institutions, and MFIs. So these are the different schemes which usually help in urban, social and economic development in the urban areas. And these schemes and all are designed at the central level, but are implemented at the ground in the ULBs. And for that, several monitoring committees are set up and all. And eventually, they make sure that people the benefits reach the people for whom they have been designed for. These are some of the references you can study. To conclude, residential, occupational and social vulnerabilities in urban areas needs to be addressed through sustained government programs via ULBs, and this has to be a sustained and a continuous effort. Thank you.